It's their dumb religion.
That is the maddest thing.
Because when you can ostracize people enough, you can murder them legally. That's been proven. That's been done. When you can convince the general public that people are ridiculous enough, you can convince the general public that their humanity is forfeit. Which is why I absolutely find this reprehensible. Not just what Mark Normand is saying, more so the fact that Chris Williamson doesn't even push back. So 7 months ago, Chris Williamson put out a podcast with comedian Mark Normand. I was a big fan of Chris Williamson's podcast, Modern Wisdom. It was interesting, intelligently put together. It had high production value. He interviews a lot of interesting guests. But most of all, I loved the way that Chris Williamson would push back against ideas. This made his interviews not just interesting, but more intellectually honest. So I was frankly disgusted at what I saw and I heard in the first few minutes of this podcast. Now, I've listened to Mark Normand before. I've listened to his stand-up comedy routine. I'm a big fan of the genre of stand-up comedy. I have been ever since I was a kid. And I first saw The Evening at the Improv on television. Oh boy, man, that was one of my favorite things. But you let me down, Mark Normand. And you let me down even worse, Chris Williamson. Because you, as a host, should have the responsibility to try to discover the truth instead of simply blindly accepting a ridiculous, comical lie. Let's listen to the clip and react to it.
Speaking of Utah, I went to Utah for the first time, and you taught me about Mormons soaking.
Yes. Are we going right into soaking?
Yeah.
I was just in Salt Lake. They still do it. I brought it up, and the crowd goes wild.
Can you explain for the uninitiated? But what is soaking?
Soaking is they can't have sex or they can't thrust, so they're allowed to put it in and just hold it there like a gun in a holster. And then they have all these loopholes, much like the Hasidic Jews. They have all these loopholes where a kid can jump on the bed next to them, and so it'll cause a humping movement without actually humping because the kid was jumping on the bed.
Madre de chupacabras, what is he talking about? What the actual heck is he talking about?
It's their dumb religion.
That is the maddest thing. But I didn't realize, it's the first time I've been to Utah, first time I've been to Park City, first time I've been to Salt Lake City. And
that is not my religion. That has nothing to do with my religion. That is not any part of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, nor has it ever been. What the heck? This dude just pulled this misinformation straight out of his butt, and not as a joke, presents it as fact, and Chris Williamson says, that is mad, simply accepts it, rolls with it, doesn't push back a little bit as at this very ridiculous sounding claim, like, are you sure? That sounds a little far-fetched. What? Let's keep listening.
I didn't realize that coffee isn't allowed.
Yes.
But energy drinks are allowed.
Yes. Loophole.
Okay, so now they're talking about a different subject. They're discussing what the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints calls the word of wisdom, which proscribes certain substances, alcohol, tobacco, coffee, tea, and harmful drugs. And they are saying, well, why is it that coffee is prescribed but not energy drinks? Probably has something to do with the fact that the word of wisdom was penned in the 1800s and they didn't have energy drinks back then. But I digress. Let's continue.
Tattoos are not allowed, but breast augmentation surgery is allowed.
Oh, is that right?
I don't believe I've ever heard a prophet speak over the pulpit about breast augmentation surgery. This is the first time I've heard anybody speak those words before. Breast augmentation is allowed. It's like, look, what the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints teaches, teach them correct principles and let them govern themselves.
They can't have sex.
They can't have sex. Where did my children come from? I got 2 of them. They just magically materialized out of the ether. Yeah. Is that how Mormons reproduce? We just, one shows up on the doorway. There's another one. We reproduce asexually like paramecium or amoebas.
It's their dumb religion.
What does the Church of Jesus Christ teach about sex? The same thing that Christ himself taught about sex. Remember the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus taught this? That not only should we not commit adultery, meaning we should not have sexual relations outside of marriage, but we should not even look upon a woman to lust after her. For if we do that, we have committed adultery in our hearts. That's not a doctrine unique to the Mormons. Those are the teachings of Christ.
It's their dumb religion.
Which are followed in the Church of Jesus Christ, which is the real name of the Mormons, which is a pejorative nickname, which people keep throwing out over and over and over again, which was popularized by people who murdered members of the Church of Jesus Christ, hunted them down, and enacted the Mormon Extermination Order back in the 1800s, which was not officially repealed until the 1980s in the United States of America. Yeah. Because when you can ostracize people enough, you can murder them legally. That's been proven. That's been done. When you can convince the general public that people are ridiculous enough, you can convince the general public that their humanity is forfeit. Which is why I absolutely find this reprehensible. Not just what Mark Normand is saying, more so the fact that Chris Williamson doesn't even push back. A podcaster known for pushing back when he hears something that doesn't quite sound right, or even pushes back if he wants more information about a topic. Not only does he not push back on this idea that Mark Normand presents, he wholeheartedly accepts it as the truth immediately and says, that's crazy, whoa.
And they have all these loopholes, much like the Hasidic Jews. They have all these loopholes where a kid can jump on the bed next to them, and so it'll cause a humping movement without actually humping, because the kid was jumping on the bed. It's their dumb religion.
That is the maddest thing.
That smug look on his face as he just described what he seems to believe is the way that members of the Church of Jesus Christ reproduce by engaging in a stationary coitus and then having a child, which apparently materialized out of nowhere, was brought by the stork or something, jump up and down on the bed while in front of their parents as they are copulating. What the actual heck, dude? How on earth did you arrive at this conclusion and say it so confidently, so with absolute confidence? I mean, look at this face. He's looking like, yeah, I'm the deliverer of the truth right here. Soak that in, Chris Williamson. Let's see how Chris responds.
It's their dumb religion.
That is the maddest thing. But I didn't realize,
It's their dumb religion. And Chris says that is the maddest thing. Not like, are you sure that's how it is? Really, that sounds a little bit preposterous. I mean, the fastest growing religion on planet Earth, with millions of constituents worldwide, somehow manages to gain so many converts when it has this incredibly dumb idea that Mark Normand has presented as if it were true and totally is not. It's like, how can you not push back on this? Chris, what's wrong with you, dude? You're better than this. You're better than this, dude.
It's the first time I've been to Utah, first time I've been to Park City, first time I've been to Salt Lake City.
So Chris has been to Utah. Okay.
I didn't realize that.
I should point something out about Utah, especially Salt Lake, because Mark Normand mentioned he did a comedy show in Salt Lake City, and the people loved it when he riffed on the Mormons and made some kind of anti-Mormon jokes. I took a look at that clip. I'm not going to show the whole thing. He essentially just kind of repeats what he said here, but as a joke rather than as fact. You can look it up. It's titled Talking Mormons in Utah, ! Under Mark Normand's channel, Mark Normand. And again, he's telling that like it's a joke. Actually, no, let's listen to it. It's only 52 seconds long. Okay, so the people ask him, talk about Mormons, tell some jokes about Mormons. He starts out saying, hey, you guys are really weird out here. Okay, so he's got a marriage joke. All right, obviously a joke. Do Mormons all get married at 18 and live with someone they hate the rest of their life? No. Is this something that has happened? Probably. But again, we can tell it's a joke. It's hyperbolic. We can laugh at hyperbole.
Soaking thing is so weird. You guys just put it in. That's some weird loophole. You know? Just put it in and you don't thrust. I can't do that. I could never. If I was inside, I'd go full Michael J. Fox and just start.
Okay, so again, he's saying this as a joke, doing funny movements, making funny faces. It's in the context of a comedy show. I'm here to tell jokes. People are laughing because he's being ridiculous on stage. Obviously, they are not laughing because this is something that is actually believed or practiced by anyone in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And it's also interesting to note a misconception a lot of people not from Utah have. I'm not from Utah, by the way. But it's this idea that everybody in Utah is a practicing member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Salt Lake City is the anti-Mormon capital of the world, just so you know. There are more disgruntled ex-members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Salt Lake City than anywhere else in the world. So if you go and perform a, let's say, irreverent comedy routine at, well, I don't know, maybe a club that perhaps serves alcohol, which is something that members of the church don't drink, and normally you're not going to see a lot of faithful members of the church at a club like this in Salt Lake City, Utah. But who will you see? Disgruntled members of the church, 100%. They want to go and hear a guy like this riff on the church, make it sound as silly as possible, so they can laugh about it and feel validated about having left the church and thought that it was silly and bad and wrong, etc. That's your audience, dude. That's why they're laughing. They're laughing at religious bigotry right here. I don't know if Mark Normand realizes the level of religious bigotry he's engaging in here right now, but that is what his audience is laughing at. This religion is dumb and bad and wrong. I feel that way too. Ha 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 ha. That's what's happening.
That is some good self-control right there. And I know the Catholics are the ones with the pedophile problems, but let's be honest, the name of that place, Brigham Young, that sounds like a pedophile bar. Brigham Young.
That is such a tired old joke. Brigham Young University. It's Brigham Young. Brigham Young. Brigham. How many times have we heard that joke? Anyone who's lived in Utah at all has heard that joke 10 billion times. Brigham Young University. And the fact that he's standing up there patting himself on the shoulder like, I made up a new joke right here. No, you didn't, Mark Normand. No, you did not. That is the most tired, crappy Mormon dad joke you will find in Utah ever. This audience has heard that ad nauseum. They're not laughing because the joke is funny. They're laughing because an outsider is repeating it. I would say more than anything, they're laughing at you rather than with you at this particular joke. Let's go back to the podcast, because they do say a few more things about the church I'd like to touch on.
Coffee isn't allowed,
Yes.
but energy drinks are allowed.
Yes. Loophole.
Tattoos are not allowed.
People have, I think, this wrong idea that the Church of Jesus Christ is this checklist of do's and don'ts. A better way to understand the faith taught by Christ is this: teach them correct principles and let them govern themselves. That's a quote from Joseph Smith. I teach them correct principles and let them govern themselves. What's the correct principle there? Don't put poison and garbage and crap into your body. It's bad for you. It's harmful to your body, to your mind, and ultimately to your soul. So, if you follow that reasoning through to its logical conclusion, if coffee's bad for you, perhaps this energy drink with all of these artificial chemicals and 10 times the caffeine or whatever the content is also not good for me, and maybe I shouldn't drink that too. But we'll leave that up to you to decide.
Mm-hmm.
But breast augmentation surgery is allowed.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, so you can get cosmetic surgery, but you can't get a tattoo.
Once again, it's not a checklist of rules like, you can do this, but you can't do that. You can do this. If that's the way you think about your religion, any religion, you're doing it wrong, friends. You're doing it wrong. But what about commandments? Yeah, let's think about commandments for a minute. People generally know about the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, might, and strength. Thou shalt not make any graven image and bow down unto it, etc., etc. So, and then in Judaism we have 613 commandments in the Levitical law, the law of Moses that Moses gave to the house of Israel. And those have been interpreted a whole lot of different ways. In the days of Christ, they got really pedantic about it. For example, Jesus and his apostles were walking through a field of grain, and they were picking some grain as they went through the field because they were hungry and they were eating it. And the scribes and Pharisees, the religious leaders of the Jews at that time, they pulled Jesus and his apostles aside and said, hey, hold on a second. You guys are breaking the law right here, the law of Moses, which you are technically harvesting grain on the Sabbath day because it was a Saturday, the Jewish Sabbath. You can't do that, and you're taking too many steps. Because that's how they interpreted the law about keeping the Sabbath day holy. Remember to keep the Sabbath day holy. How do you do that? Follow all these exact steps. There was a president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Joseph Fielding Smith, and there's a book published in his name called Answers to Gospel Questions. What it originally was, members of the church, if they had questions about the church, the doctrine, whatever, they would write a letter to the prophet and say, hey, what do you think about this? And a common question he got was, how do you keep the Sabbath day? What can you and can't you do on the Sabbath day? They wanted the scribes and the Pharisees to dictate to them exactly how it was. How many steps can we take on the Sabbath day? What activities can we do on the Sabbath day or not? And this one particular letter that President Smith answered was this. Can we watch football on Sunday? I want a definitive yes or no. Is that okay to watch a football game on Sunday? And the prophet did not give him a definitive yes or no. He said, look, you are asking to be led in all things. That's not what we do here, friends. You want to live your life like the ancient scribes and Pharisees, dictating every little jot and tittle of the law unto you. And that is not how we do things around here. President Smith went on to say, I don't personally watch football games on Sunday because I'm engaged in other activities. What shall we do on the Sabbath day, which in the Church of Jesus Christ and Christianity as a whole is celebrated on Sunday rather than Saturday as it was in the Jewish faith? In celebration of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And President Smith said, do what brings you closer to God. And left it at that. So if you can honestly in your heart of hearts say that watching a football game on Sunday brings you closer to God, and you think God's okay with that answer, okay, cool. Go do that. If the opposite is true, you know the answer. It's alarming how many people look for justification for their behavior from a third party. They want some authoritative figure to give them a yes or a no. Like, I want to do something that I personally think is not okay or not productive or not right, but I want an authoritative figure to give me the stamp of approval to take my guilt away. This happens a lot when I get questions for Q&A with the coach. People will send me questions and say, hey, Ramsey, there's this thing I want to do which is not a good thing, or it's not a good idea, but it is a low-effort idea, and it's pleasing to the carnal soul, and it's kind of what I want to do anyway, even though it's not great. Can you give me your stamp of approval on this idea, make a video about it, say it in your voice, because if I hear this in somebody else's voice, it's going to validate my preconceived notions. Yeah, man, we don't do that here. On with the show.
You can drink like New Tonic or Monster or whatever, but you can't drink coffee. And there's just, I don't know, I feel like the litigiousness should have been more watertight.
Yeah. Well, I think these rules were made before they'd thought of Red Bull.
Yes.
You know, so they're like...
Okay. So, finally, Mark Normand says one thing that makes sense. The word of wisdom was written before they invented Red Bull. Man, if...
Like, coffee's out, but you go there and the people are repressed. They're great comedy crowds because I think they're like, oh, he said that horrible thing that felt so good. I can't fuck my daughter or whatever, you know? So
he said that horrible thing, and the example of the horrible thing was that you can't fornicate with your daughter. Is the implication there that you think the people in Utah or the people in the Church of Jesus Christ want to fornicate with their daughters, that they want to engage in incest with their own children? And they're holding in this urge to do this reprehensible act? And did you say something about incest with children? Like, I'm not even going to allow my mind to entertain this dark path that apparently Mr. Normand's mind has gone down here.
the whole thing is wacky. But when you think about it, Sarah Silverman had a great bit about how we make fun of Scientology, but It's just because it's new. If someone brought out Christianity today, you'd be like, wait. She got pregnant without fucking. There's a baby Jesus. Who? Wise men. Don't eat fish on Friday. Whatever it is, like it's just new. And I think the same with Mormonism.
Don't eat fish on Friday. Is that a Catholic thing? I don't know. That's not part of my religious worldview about not eating fish on Friday. Could be pulling some stuff out of his butt about Catholics too. Who knows?
Mormonism. It's just it seems silly, but it's just because we're not in it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, the idea that if religion is new, it's harder to get behind for a lot of people, but if it's old and ancient, it sounds important. It sounds, this is thousands of years old, so it's real, it's special, it's authentic. But that just came from last century? That can't be right. Religion it's got to be old. People think this way about martial arts a lot. The idea that traditional martial arts must be good because they're ancient, except most of them aren't. Most traditional martial arts are a modern contrivance from the 1900s, some of which come even later, and this blows people's minds, and they often refuse to accept, no, I thought martial arts belts were an ancient practice of the samurai. No, it comes from the 1900s. It was borrowed from judo. Every martial art that uses a belt system, for example, borrowed that from judo in the mid-1900s. For example, Taekwondo belts date all the way back to 1956. 1956, and they borrowed it from karate, which borrowed it from judo in the 1900s. Anyway, not that old, but we tend to think old equals authoritative, and I understand why the human mind goes through this process, because we're kind of wired to at least respect elders to some degree. You're old, so you must know more than me. You've had more life experience. If we've lived a little bit, we tend to put two and two together, if we've made it past childhood anyway, and realize older people tend to know more stuff than younger people because they have experienced more life. And therefore, if a religion has been around way longer than multiple generations of people, it must have something good going on there for it. But if it hasn't,
I heard a rumor, I don't know if this is true, that the third largest cash reserves in the world are held by the Mormon Church.
Really?
That someone made them open up their accounts. Maybe there was some investigation, and obviously they're a non-profit.
So Chris is bringing up the finances of the church. Yes, the church is very financially stable. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, in order to build up the kingdom of God on this earth, which isn't just building churches and temples, which it does, which isn't just spreading the message, which it does, which isn't just offering humanitarian aid across the world on a daily basis, which it does. All of this requires funding, which includes the law of tithing, as outlined by the prophet Malachi. Bring your tithes and offerings into my storehouse, that the windows of heaven shall be opened unto you. Will a man rob God? Yet ye have robbed me, thus saith the Lord. That's an ancient law. And what has it done? What has it done? Members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints pay 10% of their income to the church. This, I know Chris is opening his eyes like, that's crazy. That's a pretty normal Christian practice across the world, across the board, regardless of denomination. And most people don't question it when you have, say, a pastor who opens a church and passes the collection plate so they can keep the lights on in that church and so on. They're like, well, duh, that's something that needs to happen. But when the Mormons do it, there's so many of them, and they have invested that wealth so wisely that it has expanded into a sum great enough to effect great change in this world. No kidding. Yep, we're smart about it.
or whatever, but just endless numbers of crazy rich people.
Wow.
Mormons and contributing to the Mormon church. And apparently the Mormon church basically built all of Salt Lake as well.
Yeah.
So
Inasmuch as ye shall keep my commandments, you shall prosper in the land, thus saith the Lord. Prosperity in that context is not specifically referring to wealth and money, although for some that certainly is the case. I want to touch on this topic for just a minute. The rise and fall of civilizations. We often tend to think that our country is going to be around forever, even though it totally hasn't been around forever. For example, the People's Republic of China, under the current government, hasn't been around that long. It's been around, like 80, 90 years? I don't remember the exact date. When I first got to China, they were celebrating like the 79th anniversary of the People's Republic of China. Now, China as a nation is ancient, but the People's Republic is, again, fairly new on the world stage. The United States of America, we tend to think, oh, it's over 200 years old. That's not that old, friends. There are many great civilizations that have lasted a lot longer than the United States, which are now gone, erased from history. I don't like the way I worded that, because there are many which have outlasted the United States and are gone and, of course, recorded in history as well. But the ones that are erased from history, man. What happened? What happened there? How do civilizations rise and fall? I would propose to you that there is an incredible truth in that Scripture. Inasmuch as ye shall keep my commandments, ye shall prosper in the land, thus saith the Lord. This is repeated many times throughout the Book of Mormon specifically. And the idea we can find throughout the Bible as well, especially in the book of Psalms. But what's the truth there? If we abide by the bare minimum, as far as decent behavior toward each other, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not lie. Some of the most basic of the 10 Commandments that even the most staunch atheist can get behind. Yeah, it's not a good idea to kill and steal and lie. So maybe let's not do that. If your civilization adheres to at least that, you're going to be more prosperous than a civilization of complete and total violent anarchy. Notice I'm bringing the distinction violent anarchy in there, where everybody murders each other for profit, steals against each other for profit, and lies and bears false witness against their neighbor for profit. That's a method to get ahead more quickly and ultimately lead your entire civilization to impending collapse. We can go one level deeper since we started out talking about the law of chastity. Thou shalt not commit adultery, one of the 10 Commandments. Meaning, do not have sexual relations outside of marriage. How can that destroy a civilization? Well, the basic unit of any civilization, every civilization on this planet, is the family, a father, a mother, and the children. And if you destroy that family unit, and you destroy enough of them, ultimately you destroy the civilization. And you wipe it from off the face of the earth. You don't have to wait for hellfire and brimstone to rain down from heaven. You don't have to wait for God to throw a lightning bolt down at you. You're going to do it to yourself. So how does abiding by that law, thou shalt not commit adultery, bolster up the family? Because without that law, without that commandment, there is no family. Without marital fidelity, a loving father and mother who raise their children in love and in Christ, as in the principles of the gospel of Christ. There is no family. And I hear right now some of you pushing back who've made it this far, but Ramsey, even godless atheists have families. Yes, and inasmuch as they keep the commandments, they shall prosper in the land. Even the godless atheists, inasmuch, even if they do the bare minimum, keep the family together. Don't kill, don't murder, don't steal, don't lie. They will be blessed for that. Even if they think the idea of God in heaven is a silly fiction.
Crazy money.
They're really nice. My assistant is Mormon, and he's phenomenal. He went and did his missionary thing, came back, immediately married, immediately moved in with his wife. I spent Christmas Eve with him and the wife and the parents-in-law at
The
Ripon
Mormon?
Cathedral. Yeah. He's
they're
great.
nice people.
They're fantastic. Just
So Chris's assistant is a member of the church, and he's apparently had a lot of experience with this guy, knows him pretty well. Is Chris thinking in his mind that his assistant believes this ridiculous idea that Mark Normand has presented? I mean, dude, it sounds like this guy is a good friend of yours. Sounds like this guy is your bro, man. And you're just going to you're not going to push back a little? Like, hey, that doesn't really sound like this dude I know. That doesn't sound like something he would be into. That doesn't add up.
some weird
Yeah.
like sub rules.
But what about the polygamy? Is that real?
I don't know. What's they can have multiple wives?
Yeah, well, that was Big Love. There's a couple reality shows about it. I don't know if that's real though. It might be outdated.
I think that they're trying.
Okay, this is interesting because he's asking, is polygamy real? I don't know if that's real. This is strange for me to hear because not just a few minutes ago, Mark was authoritatively declaring Mormons do soaking. They don't have sex like normal people. They do this crazy thing that I pulled out of my butt. But now he's getting honest and saying, I don't know if this is real. About polygamy. Plural marriage. Yeah, like 150, 60 years ago. Plural marriage was practiced in the United States by a bunch of people, including some members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The practice was discontinued a long time ago. It hasn't been a thing. Not in my lifetime, not in yours, not in your grandma's.
There's a current push at the moment to make polygamy be ratified in the same way as gay marriage was, so that you can have like a throuple marriage. That's not something legally that's recognized at the moment.
That's true.
If you get married
I don't know if that's true. I've looked into this actually because with all of the woke agendas going on about people pushing for more acceptance of the LGBT community, etc., for pushing for acceptance of gay marriage or other non-traditional, non-conventional unions, polygamy has never been part of that discussion. I've never once seen a discussion in popular media or in political media or in any house of law capable of affecting change in policies seriously discussing putting plural marriage or polygamy back on the table. So it is interesting these guys are like, that's true. Is it though? Is it? At this time, Chris Williamson has almost 3 million subscribers, and this particular video podcast got 355,000 views. And the average viewer of a 2-hour podcast on YouTube will watch the first 5 minutes. What was in the first 5 minutes? Exactly what we just discussed. This gross caricature of the beliefs of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which does not represent the Church at all, in any way, spoken authoritatively. This is how it is. This is what they do, when he pulled this information straight out of his anus. And the podcast host, once again, who apparently is best bros with a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, so close, in fact, he went to his home for Christmas, met his wife, met his family, met his parents or in-laws, and never stopped once to question, hey, that doesn't sound right, that doesn't sound plausible, what's up with that? That's not okay. Dude, you have a responsibility when you have a large audience to pursue the truth. The thing I talk about most on my channel is martial arts, because that's my job. I'm a martial arts coach. I'm an MMA coach. It's what I do. And as I've said many times, martial arts is a pursuit of the truth. We try to find what is true about combat, what works as opposed to what doesn't. And if dirty, rotten cage fighters have to come out of the woodwork to tell you, do better in your pursuit of the truth, you're on the wrong path, and it's a pretty dark one. Time to repent of your wicked ways, my friend. But it's not just Chris. This is a small little blip on the radar, just a little drop in the bucket of gross misinformation there is. One of the most honest things you can say is, I don't know. And there's not a lot of I don't know in the first 5 minutes. The first 5 minutes says, this is the way it is, but it's not true. It's disgusting. He's insinuating, among other things, that members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints are incestual and essentially want to, I can't even say the words in plain, simple English, which he put into profanity without getting censored on YouTube. What is up with that? You can say the profanity, but you can't say the real thing. We have reached a state where the machine God calls good evil and evil good. And life starts to imitate this AI art. It's gross. But again, this is just a small, little drop in the bucket. There is so much more, so many more disgusting lies than this that I have heard, and you've probably heard too, many of which you probably believe. If you want to find stuff that sounds weird or spectacular or unbelievable about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, about its history, about the Book of Mormon perhaps, about the golden plates from whence it was translated, etc., there are lots of stories to tell about that, lots of discussions to be had, lots of doubts to be raised. We can have those conversations, and we can have them honestly. This isn't that. Do better, Chris. Do better. I'm disappointed. Why does it matter? Why does any of this matter? Why does it matter if Mark Normand tells the truth or not? Why does it matter if he spreads some sensational, crazy-sounding lie about the church? Why does it matter if Chris doesn't push back about this sensationalist fib? Well, I'll tell you. Because when enough sensationalism spreads out there, people get hurt. They get hurt for real. I can throw some anecdotes at you about how I was bullied, how I was beaten, how I was stoned. Yes, actually stoned. As in having rocks thrown at you by people attempting to murder you with rocks, by people who hated the Mormons because they had heard enough sensationalist lies that set them at odds against the Church of Jesus Christ. how I was bullied in school because of my beliefs. I grew up in a small town with about 20 different churches and about 1,000 different people, all different denominations, and the one thing they all seemed to have in common is they hated the Mormons. And the other thing they all seemed to have in common was none of them understood the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. None of them understood the doctrine. None of them understood the scriptures. None of them understood who we were. What they understood was sensationalist lies. Do you know how often I heard people say things like, I know what you do in your church. Yeah, I heard all about how you wear your black robes and chant hymns to Satan while you sacrifice chickens on the altars in your temples. I seen it. I seen it. Real people get hurt over this stuff physically, emotionally, etc. At best, you are setting a precedent for physical and emotional harm. And at worst, you are hampering the work of God. Fix it.